The contents of Jack Donovan's broken safe revealed he wasn't just a struggling rancher trying to save his family's dying property in rural Montana. He was Captain Jackson Donovan, former Navy SEAL who had unknowingly purchased land containing a classified Cold War bunker worth millions in military equipment while hiding from a shadowy past that threatened not just his future, but America's national security. The revelation would transform the quiet ranching community of Pine Ridge, Montana, population 1,200, and expose a story of redemption, discovery, and courage that redefined what it means to find treasure beneath your own backyard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Jack Donovan had been a fixture in Pine Ridge since the brutal winter of 2021, arriving on a frigid December morning with nothing but a beat-up 2008 Ford F-150, loaded with duffel bags full of worn clothes, a rescued border collie named Scout, trembling in the passenger seat, and exactly $3,842 in cash. Just enough to make the down payment on the foreclosed Elkhorn Ranch on the forgotten side of Black Pine Mountain. For 3 years, he'd been the definition of a struggling rancher, working from sunrise to sunset mending fences, tending to a small herd of cattle, and somehow managing to keep his operation afloat while living paycheck to paycheck in a town that seemed to specialize in broken dreams and lost causes. The ranch he'd purchased for $3,800 down had been sitting empty for 5 years after old man Sullivan died of a heart attack while trying to save his last remaining cattle during a record-breaking blizzard. The property was a testament to better days in Pine Ridge, a 320-acre spread with rolling pastures, a stand of pine trees that provided natural shelter for livestock, and a dilapidated 2-bedroom farmhouse that leaked when it rained and barely kept out Montana's brutal winter winds. The main barn was leaning dangerously to one side. The fence lines were broken in dozens of places, and the only water source, an old well that had served the property for generations, had dried up 3 seasons ago, forcing Sullivan to haul water from town until his heart gave out from the strain. But Jack Donovan saw something in that broken-down property that no one else could see. While other potential buyers had taken one look at the crumbling farmhouse, the leaning barn, and the dry well, and walked away shaking their heads, Jack had spent 3 hours carefully examining every inch of the property with the focused intensity of someone who understood the strategic value of isolation while maintaining the appearance of complete insignificance. The townspeople of Pine Ridge had watched Jack's arrival with the mixture of curiosity and skepticism that small ranching communities reserve for outsiders who appear to have even less money than the locals. Pine Ridge, Montana wasn't the kind of place people moved to. It was the kind of place people moved through, usually as quickly as possible, or the kind of place where you were born, lived, and died without ever considering that there might be another option. Located exactly 63 miles northwest of Bozeman, the town had been built around cattle ranching and logging in the 1880s, thrived for exactly 80 years, and had been slowly dying ever since the sawmill closed in 1962. Main Street stretched for 4 blocks and told the story of economic decline through a series of empty storefronts, hand-painted for lease signs, and businesses that had optimistically opened and pessimistically closed. Cooper's General Store served as grocery, hardware, and social hub rolled into one, with prices that were high but forgiveness on your tab when times were tough. The Wagon Wheel Bar and Grill served meals that were hearty and straightforward, specializing in chicken fried steak that locals claimed was the best in 3 counties. The Pine Ridge Savings and Loan had been bought by a regional bank that clearly wanted to close the branch but hadn't figured out how to do it without looking completely heartless to the remaining customers who still stored their money there. The town's population had peaked at 3,200 in 1952 and had been steadily declining ever since. Young people left for college in Bozeman or Missoula and never came back. Middle-aged workers commuted to larger towns when they could find jobs. Retirees stayed because they couldn't afford to move and because Pine Ridge was the kind of place where a Social Security check could still cover basic living expenses if you weren't particular about luxury or excitement. When Jack Donovan moved into the old Sullivan place and began fixing up the farmhouse with nothing but determination and whatever materials he could salvage from the collapsing outbuildings, he became an instant source of speculation and concern. Here was a middle-aged man who appeared to be in his early 40s, who had clearly seen better days, moving to a town that most people were trying to escape, with a three-legged border collie as his only companion. Jack's first months in Pine Ridge were a masterclass in strategic integration and carefully managed visibility. He understood that in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, the key to hiding in plain sight was to become exactly interesting enough to satisfy curiosity without encouraging deeper investigation. He needed to be memorable enough that people would feel they knew his story, but unremarkable enough that no one would dig deeper into his background. His approach was methodical and brilliant. Within a week of arriving, he had introduced himself to every business owner on Main Street, explaining that he was a recently divorced Army veteran who had served in Afghanistan and was looking for a quiet place to rebuild his life away from the noise and chaos of the city. The story was heartbreaking enough to generate sympathy, specific enough to feel authentic, and common enough that no one would question why a former soldier might be seeking solitude and a fresh start. He chose Montana deliberately, knowing that the state had a long tradition of respecting privacy and independence, and that residents would find it entirely believable that someone might flee from the pressures of urban life to the solitude of a remote ranch. He spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen combat, without being so guarded as to seem suspicious, and he sprinkled his conversation with references to military bases and deployments that he could have learned from any veteran, but that sounded authentic to people who had never served. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jack's first priority was establishing his competence as a rancher, which required demonstrating agricultural knowledge that was impressive but not so sophisticated as to raise questions about where he had acquired such skills. He claimed to have grown up on a small farm in Idaho before joining the military, and to have worked briefly on a ranch in Wyoming after his discharge. This backstory explained his basic familiarity with livestock and property maintenance while reinforcing the narrative of a man who was trying to reconnect with simpler values after the trauma of military service. The first local resident Jack helped in Pine Ridge was Elmer Davidson, a 78-year-old rancher whose ancient tractor had broken down in the middle of cutting his last hay field before winter set in. Jack spent 4 hours under the hood, identified a fuel system problem that the mechanic in town had missed, and fixed it using parts salvaged from an abandoned tractor behind Elmer's barn. He refused payment, asking only for a bale of hay to help feed the 2 horses he hoped to buy once he got his place in order. Word spread quickly through Pine Ridge's informal communication network. Elmer told his daughter, who mentioned it to her friend at the post office, who passed it along to the next customer in line. Within a week, Jack had a steady stream of neighbors stopping by to welcome him with casseroles, home-baked bread, and offers of help with his renovation projects. Each visitor left with the impression of a quiet, capable man who was grateful for the community's welcome, but clearly preferred solitude to socializing. Jack's approach to these interactions was carefully calculated to build trust and establish boundaries while maintaining appropriate distance. He was friendly but not overly social, competent but not intimidating, and open about his limitations without appearing helpless. He would accept offers of assistance with repairs that legitimately required an extra pair of hands, but politely decline help with tasks he could manage alone. He worked efficiently, but never appeared to rush. And he treated every neighbor's problem as if it were his own, approaching broken equipment, sick animals, and damaged buildings with the calm competence of someone who had faced far worse challenges and survived. Most importantly, Jack demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to fix problems that other locals couldn't solve. His mechanical skills were extraordinary. His knowledge of livestock health was encyclopedic, and his ability to improvise solutions using available materials bordered on miraculous. Neighbors began bringing him equipment that had been declared unfixable by professionals in Bozeman, and Jack would methodically work through complex mechanical problems, electrical issues, and structural challenges that had stumped experts with decades more apparent experience. While Jack was establishing his reputation as a capable ranch hand and mechanical genius, he was simultaneously creating a home environment that would allow him to maintain the solitude he claimed to need while establishing the infrastructure required for his struggling ranch operation. The farmhouse had been Earl Sullivan's family home for 4 generations, a combination of original log cabin and haphazard additions that reflected 120 years of changing needs and limited resources. Jack spent his first month in Pine Ridge transforming the space into a functional home while concealing the sophistication of his renovation techniques. He replaced rotting floor joists with salvaged timber that he hand-hewn to match the existing structure, rewired the dangerous electrical system, using techniques that made the improvements look rudimentary when they were actually up to modern code, and reinforced the foundation using methods that made the work appear straightforward, while actually incorporating advanced engineering principles that would have impressed structural specialists. The property's water situation was Jack's most pressing concern. The old well had run dry years earlier, forcing Sullivan to haul water from town for his livestock and household needs, an expensive and time-consuming process that had contributed to the ranch's decline. Local wisdom held that the water table had dropped beyond recovery, and most neighbors advised Jack to invest in water delivery or drill an entirely new well at a cost that would have exceeded his total financial resources. Instead, Jack spent weeks researching the property's geological surveys, studying water tables, and examining historical records of the region's aquifer. He discovered that the original well had been dug in 1894, when the property was first homesteaded, and had been deepened twice during the 1930s drought. What most intrigued him was a note in county records about an underground spring that had once fed a small creek on the property, before disappearing during an earthquake in 1959. On a crisp October morning in 2021, Jack began the painstaking process of restoring the well using equipment borrowed from neighbors and techniques that he claimed to have learned from an old well digger in Wyoming. The community watched with a mixture of skepticism and admiration as Jack worked from sunrise to sunset, carefully removing debris from the original well shaft and extending it deeper using methods that seemed simultaneously primitive and ingenious. The work was slow and dangerous, requiring Jack to descend into the narrow shaft to clear decades of accumulated silt and rocks while shoring up the crumbling walls with salvaged timber. Neighbors offered help, but Jack politely declined, explaining that the confined space made additional workers a liability rather than an asset. This explanation satisfied local concerns, while allowing Jack to work without witnesses to what he was actually discovering beneath the seemingly ordinary well. On the 7th day of digging, at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon, Jack's shovel struck something that wasn't rock, soil, or natural debris. The metallic clang echoed up the well shaft, followed by a moment of silence as Jack examined what appeared to be a flat metal surface approximately 40 feet below the surface of his property. Initial inspection revealed what looked like a hatch or door, complete with a faded numerical keypad that had no logical reason to exist beneath a century-old ranch in rural Montana. Jack's discovery might have immediately become public knowledge, In a community as small as Pine Ridge, but a fortuitous early winter storm moved in that evening, dropping 8 inches of snow and effectively isolating the Elkhorn Ranch for 3 crucial days. During that time, with no witnesses and no interruptions, Jack Donovan made the discovery that would transform not just his life, but the understanding of Cold War history and the security infrastructure of the American West, using tools from his workshop and techniques that suggested far more than casual military experience. Jack carefully bypassed the keypad security system and opened the hatch to reveal a vertical shaft with a ladder, leading down into darkness. What he found at the bottom of that ladder would later be described by military historians as the most significant undocumented Cold War installation discovered in the continental United States. The hatch opened into an underground complex that extended more than 15,000 square feet beneath the Elkhorn Ranch. Facility had been constructed in 1958 at the height of the Cold War, designed as a communication and command relay station that could maintain government operations in the event of a nuclear attack on major cities. The bunker contained equipment rooms, living quarters, storage facilities, and an advanced communication center that had been state-of-the-art when it was built and sealed in 1972, when satellite technology made the relay station obsolete. Most remarkably, the facility had been completely scrubbed from official records as part of Operation Blackout, a classified initiative to create ghost sites that could be reactivated in case of national emergency without appearing in any documentation that might be compromised by foreign intelligence. The bunker beneath Elkhorn Ranch was one of 7 such facilities scattered across the American West, and the only one that remained undisturbed after the others had been decommissioned or repurposed during the 1980s and 1990s. The value of Jack's discovery was incalculable, both historically and materially. The bunker contained communications equipment, weapons, and technology that had been cutting edge in the 1960s and was now priceless to military historians and collectors. Preserved military vehicles, including 2 intact Jeeps and a specialized communications truck, sat in a garage area, maintained in operational condition by the bunker's remarkably functional environmental systems. The facility's generators, powered by a natural gas pocket that explained the property's unusual geological features, remained operational despite decades of neglect. Storage rooms contained military supplies that ranged from practical to bizarre, emergency rations with packaging designs that hadn't been seen in half a century, medical supplies that included experimental treatments developed for potential nuclear casualties, and weapon systems that had never been declassified or acknowledged in public military records. Most valuable of all was the documentation, filing cabinets filled with operational plans, communication protocols, and contingency procedures that offered unprecedented insight into Cold War strategic thinking. Jack's military background immediately helped him recognize the significance of what he had discovered. This wasn't just a forgotten bunker or an abandoned storage facility. It was a fully equipped command center designed to maintain governmental continuity during nuclear war. The equipment alone would be worth millions to collectors and museums, but the intelligence value of the documentation might be even more significant to historians and military analysts. As the snow continued to fall, isolating the ranch from curious neighbors, Jack faced the most important decision of his new life in Pine Ridge. Should he report his discovery immediately, knowing that it would bring unwanted attention and scrutiny to a man who had deliberately chosen obscurity? Or should he take time to fully understand what he had found before alerting authorities who might not appreciate the historical significance of the facility? Jack chose a middle path that reflected his strategic thinking and careful planning. He spent those 3 snowbound days cataloging and documenting the bunker's contents, creating detailed inventory lists and taking photographs of the most significant items. He secured the most sensitive documentation in a fireproof safe that he found in the facility's security office. and he developed a plan for revealing his discovery that would protect both the historical integrity of the bunker and his own privacy. When the roads cleared enough for travel, Jack drove to Bozeman and placed a call to Dr. Eleanor Wright, a professor of military history at Montana State University whose work on Cold War infrastructure he had read during his research into the Chihuahua property. The conversation was brief and carefully worded, but it was enough to pique Dr. Wright's professional curiosity and arrange a meeting at a coffee shop in Bozeman the following day. Dr. Wright later described that initial meeting as the most extraordinary moment of my academic career. Jack shared selected photographs of the bunker's interior and exterior, along with a redacted inventory that highlighted the historical significance of the discovery without revealing its exact location or the most sensitive contents. He explained that he wanted to ensure the site was properly preserved and studied, but that he was concerned about treasure hunters, vandals, or unauthorized collectors if the discovery became public knowledge too quickly. The partnership that developed between Jack Donovan and Dr. Wright would eventually be recognized as a model for cooperation between private citizens and academic institutions in preserving historical sites. Dr. Wright assembled a small team of trusted colleagues, an architect specializing in military installations, an archivist with security clearance for handling sensitive historical documents, and a technology expert who could evaluate the bunker's equipment to conduct an initial assessment under strict confidentiality agreements. The team's preliminary report, later published in a heavily redacted form in the Journal of Military History, described the Elkhorn bunker as a perfectly preserved time capsule of Cold War technology and strategic thinking. The facility's isolation and environmental systems had protected papers that would have deteriorated in normal storage conditions, preserved equipment that would have been scrapped or cannibalized elsewhere, and maintained the operational integrity of a facility that offered unprecedented insights into a classified chapter of American military history. During this initial research phase, Jack maintained his cover as a struggling rancher while secretly facilitating the academic team's work. Neighbors noticed increased activity at the Elkhorn Ranch but attributed it to Jack's ongoing renovation projects and his apparent success in restoring the property's water supply. The well, which now served as the disguised entrance to the underground facility, appeared to be fully functional, with new pipes carrying water to the house and to stock tanks, strategically placed in pastures where Jack's small but growing herd of cattle grazed. The ranching operation itself was showing signs of modest success, with Jack slowly acquiring additional livestock through trades and careful purchases that stayed within the financial limitations of his cover identity. He built relationships with other ranchers, exchanging labor for equipment use and gradually establishing himself as a respected member of the PUV agricultural community while diverting attention from the extraordinary discovery beneath his pastures. Jack's integration into Pine Ridge's social fabric was a carefully orchestrated process that required him to become visible enough to be accepted as a community member while maintaining enough privacy to protect his ongoing work with Dr. Wright's team. He understood that in a small town, isolation would be more suspicious than controlled interaction. So he systematically built relationships that would satisfy local curiosity while reinforcing his cover identity. His first ally in the community was Martha Wilson, the 72-year-old owner of Cooper's General Store, who had been watching Pine Ridge's slow decline for over 50 years. Martha had initially been skeptical of Jack, wondering what kind of man would choose to take on a failing ranch in a dying town. But Jack's first visit to the store had impressed Martha, with his knowledge of ranching supplies and his respectful attitude toward the older woman's experience and advice. Jack made a point of shopping at Cooper's whenever possible, even when he could have purchased supplies more cheaply in Bozeman. He would ask Martha's advice about local vendors, building maintenance issues, and community customs, treating the older woman as a valuable source of information while gradually sharing carefully selected details about his own background and challenges. This relationship served multiple purposes. It provided Jack with intelligence about local personalities and politics, established him as someone who respected community traditions, and gave Martha a sense of purpose in helping a newcomer succeed in difficult circumstances. The relationship with Martha Wilson also provided Jack with valuable information about Pine Ridge's informal power structure and communication networks. Martha had lived in the town long enough to know every family's history, every business relationship, and every personal conflict that might affect Jack's operations. She understood which residents could be trusted with confidential information, which ones were incorrigible gossips, and which ones had connections to government agencies that might pose security risks to Jack's careful management of the bunker. Discovery. Jack's relationship with the Henderson family, who owned the Wagon Wheel Bar and Grill, developed more slowly, but became equally important for his integration into the community. Tom and Susan Henderson had moved to Pine Ridge from Seattle in the early 2000s, pursuing a simpler life and affordable property prices after corporate burnout. They understood the challenges Jack faced as someone trying to establish himself in a close-knit rural community where newcomers were viewed with initial suspicion. The Hendersons became Jack's primary source of information about the broader region, introducing him to their network of friends and business associates throughout southwestern Montana. This connection provided Jack with plausible reasons to travel to Bozeman for meetings with Dr. Wright and her team, disguised as social visits or business connections facilitated by his friendship with the restaurant owners. Jack's most strategically important relationship was with Sheriff Mike Collins, a 20-year veteran of law enforcement who served as Pine Ridge's primary connection to county and state authorities. Collins was a competent, honest lawman who took his responsibilities seriously despite being understaffed and underfunded. He had initially been concerned about Jack's arrival, running background checks that revealed a military service record for Jack, Donovan, that seemed legitimate but lacked the kind of detailed information that most veterans' records contained. Sheriff Collins's suspicions were gradually allayed by Jack's consistent behavior, his positive contributions to the community, and his respectful cooperation whenever their professional duties intersected. Jack always had current vehicle registrations and appropriate permits for his ranch operations. He maintained proper documentation for the firearms that would be expected on a working ranch, and he reported safety concerns or suspicious activities that came to his attention through his work in the community. Most importantly, he demonstrated the kind of situational awareness and respect for law enforcement that suggested someone who understood the importance of maintaining good relationships with local authorities. What Sheriff Collins didn't realize was that Jack's background checks had been carefully managed to reveal exactly the information needed to satisfy initial scrutiny while concealing details that might raise additional questions. The military service record that appeared in official databases had been created specifically to support Jack's cover identity, complete with commendations and deployment histories that were impressive enough to explain his skills and experiences, without triggering the kind of heightened interest that might accompany more classified service records. As winter gave way to spring in 2022, Jack's management of the underground bunker entered a new phase that required even more careful balancing of his cover identity and his work with Dr. Wright's team. The initial assessment had confirmed the extraordinary historical significance of the facility, and proper preservation now required specialized equipment and expertise that couldn't be easily disguised as normal ranching operations. Jack and co-pumpent and expertise that couldn't be easily disguised as normal ranching operations. Jack and Dr. Wright developed a cover story that would explain increased activity at the ranch while protecting the true nature of their work. They established a limited liability company called Elkhorn Historical Preservation, ostensibly dedicated to documenting and preserving the ranch's original homestead features as an example of early Montana settlement patterns. This explanation provided reasonable cover for the presence of academic researchers, specialized equipment, and the occasional government vehicle that might be noticed by observant neighbors. Martha Wilson became an unwitting ally in establishing the credibility of this cover story, enthusiastically sharing her knowledge of the Sullivan family's history with Dr. Wright, and inadvertently helping to build a narrative that local residents found both plausible and appealing. The idea that someone was working to preserve Pine Ridge's heritage resonated with community members who had watched their town's history slowly disappear as buildings were abandoned and families moved away. By summer 2022, the academic team had completed a comprehensive inventory of the bunker's contents and had begun the delicate process of determining which government agencies needed to be notified about specific aspects of the discovery. The weapon systems, particularly those that incorporated classified technology, required communication with Department of Defense representatives. The historical documentation needed evaluation by National Archives specialists. And the facility itself, as an undocumented government installation, raised legal questions about property rights and national security implications. Dr. Wright's academic connections and professional reputation provided crucial legitimacy during these initial contacts with government agencies. Rather than approaching the discovery as a private citizen who might be viewed with suspicion, Jack was able to work through established academic channels that framed the bunker as a historical find rather than a security concern. This approach protected Jack from immediate scrutiny, while ensuring that the bunker's contents were properly evaluated and preserved. The first official government representatives to visit the Elkhorn bunker arrived in July 2022, disguised as members of Dr. Wright's research team to avoid drawing attention in the small community. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Rodriguez and Dr. Samantha Chen, representing the Defense Department's Historical Division, spent 3 days evaluating the facilities' contents and comparing the inventory to classified records of Cold War installations. Their assessment, later shared with Jack and Dr. Wright under a limited disclosure agreement, confirmed that the Elkhorn bunker was indeed part of Operation Blackout, a network of communication relay stations designed to maintain government function during nuclear war. What made the discovery particularly significant was that the other 6 known facilities had been decommissioned and cleared of equipment during the 1980s, making the Elkhorn bunker the only intact example of this classified program. The military historians were especially interested in the facility's documentation, which included operational plans and communication protocols that filled gaps in the historical record of America's Cold War preparedness. These documents revealed strategic thinking that had never been acknowledged in declassified materials, offering unprecedented insight into how military planners had prepared for scenarios that were too disturbing to be shared with the public. The bunker's equipment represented another kind of historical treasure, physical examples of technology that had been developed specifically for these classified facilities and never documented in public technical literature. The communication systems incorporated encryption methods that bridged the gap between World War II code machines and early digital security. The environmental systems included air and water purification technologies that had later been adapted for space exploration. Even the facility's construction techniques represented classified approaches to creating structures that could withstand nuclear blast effects. As the historical assessment progressed, Jack continued to maintain his cover as a struggling rancher, slowly building a viable agricultural operation on the Elkhorn property. He expanded his cattle herd through careful purchases that stayed within his apparent financial means, improved the visible infrastructure of the ranch with projects that neighbors could observe and understand, and continued to participate in community activities at a level that reinforced his identity as a private but not secretive member of Pine Ridge society. What neighbors couldn't see was that the seemingly ordinary Rancher was now at the center of a classified historical preservation project that involved multiple government agencies, academic institutions, and private collectors who recognized the significance of what lay beneath the Montana pastures. Jack's management of these competing interests required diplomatic skills and strategic thinking that went far beyond what would be expected from his cover identity. The question of what would ultimately happen to the bunker and its contents became increasingly complex as more people became aware of the discovery. National security agencies argued that some materials should be removed to secure facilities for further analysis. Museums and historical societies expressed interest in acquiring equipment and documentation for public education. Private collectors made discreet inquiries about purchasing items that might eventually be declared surplus government property. Through all these discussions, Jack maintained his position as the property owner whose cooperation was essential for any resolution. His partnership with Dr. Wright gave him academic credibility that balanced the institutional power of government agencies. His careful management of information about the discovery allowed him to control the narrative in ways that protected both the historical integrity of the site and his own privacy concerns. By the fall of 2022, a compromise agreement was taking shape that would preserve the most significant aspects of the bunker while respecting multiple stakeholders' interests. The facility itself would remain intact as a historical site, with ownership transferred to a specially created trust that included academic institutions, government historical agencies, and private preservation foundations. The most sensitive documentation would be removed to secure government archives after being properly digitized and cataloged for historical research. Equipment and materials would be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, with some items remaining in place as part of the preserved facility, others transferred to museums with appropriate security clearances, and a small number of duplicative or less significant items potentially available for private acquisition through controlled channels. Jack would retain ownership of the surface property, with easements allowing controlled access to the underground facility for research and preservation purposes. This arrangement promised to protect the historical significance of the discovery, while providing financial compensation that would transform Jack's struggling ranch into a sustainable operation. The proposed trust would pay fair market value for the underground facility, with additional considerations for Jack's role in preserving the site and cooperating with researchers. Museums and educational institutions were offering consulting fees for his ongoing involvement in interpreting the site's significance. The future seemed secure, with Jack established as a respected rancher whose property happened to include a historically significant site that was being properly preserved through his cooperation with academic and government partners. His cover identity was intact, his privacy was protected, and the extraordinary discovery beneath his land was being handled in ways that served the public interest while respecting national security concerns. Then, on November 14, 2022, everything changed. A routine background verification process conducted as part of the trust establishment uncovered inconsistencies in Jack Donovan's military service records that triggered automated security protocols. Within 24 hours, a specialized team from the Defense Department's Counterintelligence Division arrived in Pine Ridge, and the carefully constructed narrative that Jack had maintained for nearly a year began to unravel. The contents of that broken safe revealed that Jack Donovan wasn't just a struggling rancher trying to preserve a historical discovery. He was Captain Jackson Donovan, former member of a classified special operations unit who had disappeared 3 years earlier, while under investigation for allegedly selling military intelligence to private security contractors. The safe contained documentation that would not only clear his name, but expose a conspiracy within military intelligence that had been using these forgotten Cold War facilities for unauthorized operations. The revelation would transform not just Jack's quiet life in Pine Ridge, But our understanding of how deeply the past remains buried beneath the ordinary surface of American life, and how extraordinary discoveries sometimes lead to even more remarkable truths about the people who make them. When Jessica Blackwood arrived in the drought-stricken town of Cedar Creek, Arizona, in the summer of 2020, locals couldn't figure out why anyone would choose to buy the abandoned Walker Ranch. The 200-acre property had been sitting empty for nearly 7 years after Old Man Walker passed away, leaving behind a property that hadn't seen rainfall in 18 months. The main house was barely standing, the barn roof had partially collapsed, and the once productive well that had sustained generations of Walker cattle had dried up completely during the region's worst drought in recorded history. Yet there she was, a woman in her mid-30s with quiet eyes that seemed to have seen more than they should, driving a dust-covered 2012 Ram pickup with everything she owned packed in the truck bed and a border collie named Bandit riding shotgun. She paid cash for the property, $12,500 down on a place the bank had been trying to unload for years, and moved into the dilapidated farmhouse that very night, sleeping on a camping cot while coyotes howled in the distance. The people of Cedar Creek had seen their share of dreamers and drifters over the years. Their remote corner of northern Arizona had always attracted people looking to escape something: the law, failed relationships, or just the complications of modern life. But Jessica Blackwood didn't fit neatly into any of those categories. She wasn't running scared like someone with legal troubles, wasn't bitter like someone escaping a bad marriage, and wasn't naive like city folks who imagined that rural living would be simpler than urban life. There was something different about the way she evaluated the property, examining the boundaries and terrain with the practiced eye of someone who understood tactical advantage rather than agricultural potential. She asked questions about water rights and mineral deposits that showed unexpected knowledge of Western resource law. Most puzzling, she seemed utterly undeterred by the fact that the property's only water source had failed completely, approaching the challenge with the calm certainty of someone who knew something others didn't. Cedar Creek itself was a place that time seemed determined to forget. Nestled in a valley surrounded by red rock formations that glowed like fire at sunset, the town had been established in 1887 as a ranching community that served the surrounding cattle operations. For nearly a century, it had maintained a stable population of around 2,000 residents, neither growing nor shrinking, as generations of the same families worked the land and ran the businesses that supported them. That stability had been shattered by the prolonged drought that began in 2010. First came the water restrictions, then the failing crops and diminishing cattle herds, and finally the economic collapse as ranches went bankrupt and businesses closed for lack of customers. By the time Jessica arrived, Cedar Creek's population had dwindled to fewer than 800 people, mostly aging ranchers too stubborn to leave and those too financially strapped to start over elsewhere. Main Street told the story of decline through its empty storefronts and faded signs. The Desert Rose Cafe remained open, serving comfort food to locals and the occasional tourists who veered off the highway to see the red rock formations. Watson's General Store functioned as grocery, hardware store, and unofficial community center, with prices that reflected the cost of trucking supplies to such a remote location. The Cedar Creek Bank had been acquired by a regional chain that maintained limited hours 3 days a week. The town's water situation was particularly dire. The municipal well that served the town center was holding steady, but at least a dozen private wells on outlying properties had failed in the past 5 years. Drilling deeper was prohibitively expensive for most residents, and the water table seemed to be receding faster than new wells could reach it. The Walker Ranch had been one of the first casualties, its once reliable well running dry back in 2013, contributing to Old Man Walker's decision to give up the fight against nature's apparent determination to reclaim the land. When Jessica announced her intention to restore the Walker Ranch well, locals reacted with a mixture of pity and amusement. Ed Watson, whose family had run the general store for 3 generations, tried to talk her out of wasting her money. "That well's been bone dry for 7 years, Miss Blackwood," he explained while selling her basic supplies during her first week in town. Walker spent his last savings trying to bring it back. Had professionals from Phoenix come out with all their fancy equipment, didn't make a bit of difference. Jessica just smiled in that quiet way of hers and replied, "Sometimes you have to look at old problems from new angles. Mr. Watson, water doesn't just disappear, it changes course. I've got some ideas that might work where others failed." Those ideas turned out to be far more sophisticated than anyone in Cedar Creek could have imagined. Jessica spent her first month on the property conducting what appeared to be a methodical survey, walking the land in careful grid patterns, taking soil samples, making detailed notes, and studying maps that she spread across her kitchen table. Each evening, locals assumed she was wasting her time on amateur geology, but Jessica's approach reflected knowledge and techniques that went far beyond what would be expected from a newcomer to ranching. She explained to curious neighbors that she had learned about water management during her time working for an international relief organization in drought-stricken regions of Africa. This backstory, which she shared sparingly and only when directly asked, provided plausible explanation for both her unusual skills and her apparent comfort with hardship conditions. It also discouraged too many questions about her past, as people respected that relief workers often saw traumatic situations they preferred not to discuss. In truth, Jessica's understanding of groundwater systems came from far more classified sources. Her analytical approach to the property's water situation drew on techniques developed for military installations in combat zones, where finding and securing water sources was often a matter of operational survival. The maps she studied included geological surveys that weren't available to the public, and the equipment she used to test soil composition had been designed for specialized government applications rather than civilian use. 6 weeks after her arrival, Jessica began the physical work of restoring the Walker Ranch well. Rather than hiring a commercial drilling operation, which would have been the expected approach, and would have allowed outside experts to evaluate her plans, she assembled her own equipment from components purchased from multiple suppliers across 3 states. To casual observers, her setup looked like a makeshift attempt by someone working with limited resources. To anyone with specialized knowledge, the system represented an ingenious adaptation of military-grade boring technology modified for civilian application. The first breakthrough came when Jessica's border collie, Bandit, did something unexpected. While she was working near the original well site, the dog began digging frantically about 30 yards to the east, in an area where the ground showed no obvious signs of moisture or disturbance. When Jessica investigated, she discovered that the soil composition was subtly different there, information that aligned with anomalies she had noted in her survey data. This discovery led her to shift her attention from the original well site to this new location, a decision that locals found puzzling, but attributed to the desperation of someone unwilling to accept defeat. For 3 weeks, Jessica worked from dawn until dusk, operating equipment that she had modified herself and declining offers of help from neighbors, who were divided between admiration for her determination and certainty that she was wasting her time. She constructed a protective structure around her worksite, ostensibly to shield the equipment from the elements, but actually to prevent observers from seeing exactly what she was doing as her excavation reached crucial depths. On October 12, 2020, precisely 87 days after purchasing the property, Jessica Blackwood struck water. The discovery itself wasn't witnessed by anyone from town, as she had been careful to conduct the final phase of drilling when no visitors were likely to appear. But the evidence was undeniable. Within days, a storage tank beside the house began to fill. Pipes carried water to newly established troughs in the pastures, and a small pump system delivered running water to the farmhouse for the first time in 7 years. Word spread quickly through Cedar Creek's efficient gossip network. Jessica Blackwood, the quiet newcomer who everyone had written off as another dreamer destined for failure, had accomplished what professional well drillers with decades of experience had deemed impossible. The implications extended beyond her property. If water could be found at Walker Ranch, perhaps other failed wells in the area could be revitalized using similar methods. Jessica's explanation for her success was deliberately understated. The original well was drilled on outdated assumptions about the local aquifer. She told Ed Watson, knowing her words would be repeated throughout the community. I found evidence that geological shifts had changed the water's path. It wasn't magic, just careful observation and willingness to look where others hadn't. This explanation was technically true, but drastically incomplete. What Jessica couldn't reveal was that her careful observation had included analysis using classified hydrological modeling developed for military applications in desert warfare zones. The geological shifts she referenced were documented in government surveys conducted as part of a classified assessment of Western water security. And the location where she ultimately found water wasn't discovered by luck or intuition, but through methodical application of technologies that weren't available to civilian contractors. Jessica's successful restoration of the Walker Ranch, while transformed her position in the Cedar Creek community. She was no longer viewed as a misguided outsider, but as someone with valuable skills and knowledge that might benefit others facing similar challenges. Neighboring ranchers began to approach her for advice about their own water problems, offering to pay for consultations or equipment sharing. Local businesses extended credit as it became clear she wasn't just another transient destined to abandon the property when reality proved harsher than expectations. This newfound respect provided perfect cover for the next phase of Jessica's work on the property. With water now flowing and her competence established, she could begin the renovations that would transform the dilapidated ranch house and outbuildings into functional spaces suited to her actual purposes. She hired local workers for projects that would be visible to the community, replacing the farmhouse roof, rebuilding the barn's western wall, constructing new corral fencing, while reserving certain tasks for herself, particularly those involving the areas around the new well and an old storage cellar behind the house. The cellar became the focus of Jessica's private work during the winter months. To casual observers, she appeared to be conducting routine structural repairs to prevent collapse during the rainy season. She installed new support beams, replaced the rotting wooden doors with more secure metal ones, and improved the drainage system around the perimeter. These visible improvements seemed like sensible efforts to preserve a useful storage space, giving no indication that they were actually preliminary steps in a much more significant excavation. What neighbors couldn't see was that Jessica was systematically expanding the cellar, digging deeper and wider using techniques that minimized visible soil displacement and noise. She worked primarily at night when the property was naturally isolated by darkness, carefully managing the disposal of excavated material by distributing it across the property in ways that mimicked natural erosion patterns or using it for legitimate landscaping projects around the house and barn. The renovated farmhouse provided another layer of operational security. Jessica focused her visible improvements on the exterior and main living spaces, repairs that neighbors would notice and approve as signs of the property's revitalization. The interior renovations included electrical upgrades that she explained as necessary modernization for a house with dangerously outdated wiring. The actual electrical work was far more sophisticated, establishing systems that could handle specialized equipment and communications technology, while appearing completely ordinary to anyone who might visit. By spring 2021, Jessica had established herself as a determined and modestly successful small-scale rancher. She acquired a small herd of cattle selected for drought resistance, planted native grasses and pastures irrigated by her new water system, and began selling premium grass-fed beef to specialty markets in Flagstaff and Phoenix. This legitimate agricultural operation provided perfect cover for the property's increased electrical usage, regular deliveries of supplies, and Jessica's occasional absences when she traveled to meet with contacts who couldn't risk visiting the ranch directly. The community's acceptance of Jessica was solidified through her careful participation in local life, present enough to be considered a good neighbor, but reserved enough that her privacy seemed like a natural personality trait rather than operational security. She attended community events like the Volunteer Fire Department's monthly fundraising breakfasts and the high school's agricultural program competitions. She joined the local conservation district's advisory board, where her knowledge of water management was genuinely valuable to other ranchers struggling with drought conditions. Jessica's most strategic relationship in Cedar Creek was with Sheriff Ray Martinez, the county's primary law enforcement presence in the remote community. Martinez had served as sheriff for 15 years, earning respect for his fair-minded approach to policing and his deep understanding of the region's challenges. He had initially run Jessica's information through standard background checks when she purchased the property, a routine precaution in a community where newcomers sometimes brought problems with them. The background check revealed exactly what Jessica had designed it to show: a woman who had spent most of her career working for international relief organizations specializing in water access projects, with employment history that was impressive, but difficult to verify due to the remote locations and non-governmental organizations involved. There were no red flags, no criminal history, and enough legitimate references to satisfy standard due diligence without triggering deeper investigation. Sheriff Martinez's initial professional curiosity about Jessica gradually evolved into respectful professional interaction as he observed her positive contributions to the community. She maintained proper permits for her ranch operations, respected local regulations about water usage and land management, and demonstrated the kind of self-sufficiency that law enforcement in remote areas appreciated. When she installed security cameras around her property, she explained them as necessary protection for livestock in an area where mountain lions occasionally preyed on calves, a legitimate concern that Martinez understood without question. Jessica's relationships with other community members were similarly calibrated to establish her as a valued neighbor while maintaining appropriate distance. She became particularly close to Eleanor Diaz, an 80-year-old widow whose family had ranched in the area since the 1920s. Eleanor's small property adjoined the Walker Ranch, and her own well had been producing diminishing yields for years. When Jessica offered to extend her water system to provide emergency backup for Eleanor's household needs, she established both practical assistance and a friendship that gave her insights into the community's history and dynamics. "My husband always said there was something special about the Walker place," Eleanor told Jessica during one of their regular coffee visits. James Walker's grandfather found that land back in 1892, and family legend says he chose it because an old Apache guide told him there was a special energy there, something about the way the rocks were formed or how the underground streams flowed. People thought it was just superstition, but that ranch always had the best water in the county until this drought hit. These conversations provided Jessica with valuable local knowledge that supplemented her technical understanding of the property. Eleanor's stories about the land's history, the patterns of seasonal changes, and the geological events that had shaped the valley over generations offered context that wasn't captured in official surveys or government reports. Most importantly, these interactions established Jessica as someone who respected local wisdom and valued connection with the community's elders, qualities that generated trust and goodwill among Cedar Creek's residents. Jessica's relationship with the younger generation was equally strategic. She hired local teenagers for summer work on the ranch, teaching them practical skills while evaluating which ones might be trustworthy for more specialized tasks as her operation expanded. She donated equipment to the high school's agricultural program and offered to mentor students interested in sustainable ranching practices. These connections not only strengthened her cover identity, but also provided legitimate reasons for bringing additional workers onto the property during periods when more labor-intensive aspects of her hidden work required extra hands. By the fall of 2021, Jessica Blackwood had achieved something remarkable. She had transformed a failed ranch into a modestly successful operation while simultaneously establishing the infrastructure and community relationships needed for her actual mission. Her cover as a dedicated rancher working to revitalize drought-stricken land was so convincing that even those who spent significant time with her never questioned whether there might be more to her presence in Cedar Creek than agricultural ambition and a desire for rural solitude. What none of her neighbors suspected was that Jessica's work on the well had uncovered something far more significant than a new water source. At approximately 180 feet below the surface, her specialized drilling equipment had struck not just water, but metal, specifically the reinforced ceiling of a structure that had no business existing beneath a remote Arizona ranch. Initial investigation using fiber optic cameras and ground-penetrating radar confirmed that the anomaly was man-made, extensive, and deliberately concealed. Further exploration revealed that the structure was accessible through an entrance hidden within the root cellar behind the farmhouse, an entrance that had been sealed and disguised decades earlier. Jessica's careful excavation of this access point, conducted during nights when the property was completely isolated, eventually revealed a reinforced door with an obsolete but still functional security system that reflected military engineering. From the early 1970s, what lay beyond that door would prove to be one of the most significant undocumented discoveries of Cold War infrastructure in American history, a fully equipped underground monitoring station designed to track Soviet communications and missile activities. The facility had been constructed in 1968 as part of Project Echo, a classified program that established listening posts in remote western locations where unique geological formations created natural amplification of certain radio frequencies used by Soviet military communications. The Cedar Creek installation had been operational for just under a decade before advances in satellite technology made such ground-based monitoring stations obsolete. Rather than decommissioning the facility through standard procedures, which would have created a paper trail in government records, Project Echo's administrators had opted for a more secure approach, sealing the installation with equipment intact and removing all documentation from official inventories. The property had been sold to James Walker with easement restrictions that prevented deep excavation but gave no indication of what lay beneath the surface. Jessica's discovery confirmed intelligence that had led her to the Walker Ranch in the first place. Fragmentary references to Project Echo in classified documents that suggested the Cedar Creek installation might have contained unique technologies and records that were never properly accounted for during the program's official termination. What she couldn't have anticipated was the extraordinary condition of the facility, preserved by geological isolation and environmental systems that had continued to function on minimal power for nearly 5 decades. The underground installation extended across approximately 15,000 square feet, with multiple chambers dedicated to different functions. The main monitoring room contained receiver equipment designed to capture and decode radio transmissions from thousands of miles away, along with analog computers that analyze signal patterns for indicators of Soviet military activity. Separate rooms housed communication systems, living quarters for up to 6 personnel, storage areas for supplies and equipment maintenance, and a small medical facility. Most valuable from both historical and intelligence perspectives was the records room, a climate-controlled chamber containing filing cabinets filled with operational logs, technical manuals, and analysis reports that had never been transferred to central archives. These documents represented a previously lost chapter of Cold War history, offering insights into surveillance, capabilities, and intelligence assessments that had been omitted from declassified accounts of the period. Jessica's training had prepared her to recognize the significance of specific technologies and documents within the facility. She began a methodical inventory, carefully documenting each component and record while assessing their historical and intelligence value. This work had to be balanced with maintaining her cover operations on the surface, managing the ranch, participating in community activities, and continuing the visible improvements that reinforced her identity as a dedicated agricultural entrepreneur. The dual demands created a carefully choreographed routine. Days were dedicated to legitimate ranching activities, community interactions, and improvements to the property's visible infrastructure. Nights were spent in the underground facility, cataloging its contents and establishing secure communications with the intelligence agencies that had authorized her mission. The schedule was physically demanding but operationally necessary, maintaining the separation between her public identity and classified work. What Jessica couldn't have anticipated was how her success in restoring the ranch's water supply would attract attention beyond Cedar Creek's local community. The region's prolonged drought had created desperate conditions on many properties, and news of an unconventional approach that had succeeded where traditional methods failed spread quickly through agricultural networks. By early 2022, the Walker Ranch, now increasingly referred to as the Blackwood Ranch, had become a point of interest for water resource specialists, agricultural extension agents, and environmental researchers. This professional interest created both opportunities and security challenges. The attention validated Jessica's cover identity, reinforcing her reputation as an innovative problem solver in water management. However, it also brought visitors with technical expertise who might notice anomalies that casual observers would miss. Unusual power consumption patterns, specialized equipment disguised as agricultural tools, or security measures that exceeded normal ranch requirements. Jessica adapted to this increased scrutiny by developing a secondary cover story that acknowledged some of her technical sophistication while concealing its actual source. She presented herself as part of an informal network of former international aid workers who were applying techniques developed in global crisis zones to domestic agricultural challenges. This explanation accounted for her unconventional approaches, while creating a plausible reason for occasional security precautions, as people who had worked in conflict zones often maintained habits of vigilance even in safer environments. The strategy proved effective, allowing Jessica to accommodate increased interest in her water management system while maintaining the security of her primary mission. She conducted limited tours of specific ranch operations, demonstrating irrigation techniques and water conservation methods that were genuinely innovative while keeping visitors away from sensitive areas near the farmhouse cellar and the original well site. As winter turned to spring in 2022, Jessica's dual operations had reached a stable equilibrium. The ranch was functioning as a legitimate and modestly profitable agricultural enterprise. The underground facility had been fully documented, with priority materials prepared for secure transfer to appropriate government archives. Local acceptance of Jessica's presence had evolved from cautious welcome to genuine appreciation for her contributions to the community. Then came the discovery that would shatter this carefully maintained balance and expose secrets far beyond what Jessica had been sent to find: an unmarked filing cabinet in the deepest section of the underground facility, containing documents classified above top secret that revealed Project Echo had been more than a passive listening operation. The facility had also served as a command center for active measures against Soviet operations on American soil, including counterintelligence operations that had never been acknowledged in any official history. Most disturbing were records indicating that the Cedar Creek installation had been abruptly shut down following an incident in 1976 that involved unauthorized use of the facility's resources by elements within military intelligence. The document suggested that the decision to seal the facility rather than decommission it through normal channels had been motivated not by operational security concerns, but by the need to conceal evidence of activities that exceeded legal authorization. Jessica's discovery of these records triggered immediate security protocols that would bring specialized personnel to the Walker Ranch within 48 hours. The window for maintaining her cover identity was closing rapidly, forcing her to make decisions about how to protect both the historical significance of the facility and the community relationship she had built during her time in Cedar Creek. The contents of that secure filing cabinet would reveal that Jessica Blackwood wasn't just a rancher who had uncovered a forgotten piece of Cold War history. She was Captain Jessica Blackwood, intelligence specialist assigned to a classified project recovering undocumented government facilities that might contain evidence of operations never properly reported to congressional oversight committees. The revelation would transform not just her quiet life in Cedar Creek, but our understanding of how thoroughly the Cold War had reached into American soil and how its secrets continued to influence national security decades after the conflict had officially ended. The true scale of Jessica Blackwood's operation beneath the Walker Ranch remained hidden from the residents of Cedar Creek, shielded by carefully managed perceptions and a cover story that perfectly balanced believability with privacy. While locals saw a determined woman bringing a failed ranch back to life through innovative water management, the reality beneath the surface involved technologies and discoveries that would eventually rewrite portions of Cold War history. Underground facility that Jessica had discovered extended far beyond initial estimates, with tunnel systems branching from the main installation that had never appeared on any official blueprint. These passages connected to secondary chambers that contained equipment even more advanced than what had been found in the primary monitoring station, prototypes of surveillance technology that wouldn't be declassified until decades later, if ever. Most remarkable was the communications center, which contained not just receiving equipment for monitoring Soviet transmissions, but broadcasting capabilities that could inject false information into enemy channels, a technological capacity that few knew existed during that era. The system incorporated encryption methods that bridged analog and early digital approaches, representing a missing link in the history of secure communications that would fascinate intelligence historians when eventually declassified. Jessica's training had prepared her to recognize significant technologies, but certain aspects of the installation fell outside even her specialized knowledge. The facility's power system was particularly puzzling, designed to draw minimal external electricity while maintaining full operational capacity through an energy generation method that resembled modern geothermal approaches but incorporated modifications that suggested classified enhancements. This isn't just ahead of its time, it's outside the documented development timeline completely, Jessica noted in her secure communications with operation handlers. The technical specifications suggest capabilities that weren't supposed to exist until at least the 1980s, yet installation dates on components confirm they were operational by 1971. There's a technological leap here that isn't accounted for in any declassified program history. While maintaining her ranching operations above ground, Jessica established a systematic protocol for documenting the underground facility. Each chamber was photographed, measured, and inventoried. Equipment was cataloged with serial numbers checked against classified databases. Documents were organized according to security classification and historical significance. This meticulous approach ensured that when the time came to officially acknowledge the discovery, nothing would be overlooked or misinterpreted. The ranch itself continued to thrive under Jessica's management, providing perfect cover for the intensive work happening beneath the surface. She expanded the cattle operation to include heritage breeds, particularly suited to drought conditions, creating legitimate reasons for specialized feed deliveries and veterinary visits that could mask other supply movements. She installed solar panels that reduced the property's reliance on external power while explaining increased energy capacity that actually supported the underground facility. Jessica's water management system became her most valuable cover asset. The innovative approach she had developed to restore the Walker Ranch well had proven so effective that agricultural extension agents from the state university requested permission to document her methods as a potential model for other drought-affected properties. This professional validation created opportunities to explain specialized equipment and technical knowledge that might otherwise have raised questions. Dr. Alina Ramirez, a hydrologist from Arizona State University, became a particularly useful professional contact. Her academic interest in Jessica's water reclamation approach provided legitimate reasons for technical discussions that helped refine Jessica's cover expertise. What you've accomplished here challenges conventional assumptions about aquifer access in depleted basins, Dr. Ramirez observed during her third visit to the property. The traditional approach would have been to drill deeper, but you've identified lateral flow patterns that others missed completely. Jessica carefully managed these professional relationships to enhance her cover identity while maintaining operational security. She welcomed academic interest in specific aspects of her ranch management while establishing clear boundaries around others. I'm happy to share what I've learned about water reclamation, she would explain, but some of my other projects are still in development stages that I'm not ready to discuss publicly. This selective transparency reinforced her image as an innovative but privately minded rancher. The underground facility's most valuable contents proved to be not the equipment itself, but the operational logs and technical reports that documented activities never acknowledged in official histories. These records revealed that Project Echo had served functions beyond passive intelligence gathering, including active counterintelligence operations against suspected Soviet assets operating in the American Southwest during the early 1970s. Most significantly, the documents indicated that the Cedar Creek installation had been part of a network of similar facilities across the western states, with each location chosen for specific geological features that enhanced particular monitoring capabilities. Cross-references in the log suggested at least 6 other installations, only 3 of which appeared in any declassified inventory of Cold War infrastructure. The implication was clear. Other facilities like the one beneath Walker Ranch might still exist, unacknowledged and potentially intact. This discovery elevated the importance of Jessica's mission beyond historical documentation to active national security concerns. If Soviet intelligence had identified these facilities during the Cold War, their locations might appear in archives that had become accessible following the USSR's collapse. The potential for foreign governments or private entities to locate and exploit abandoned American intelligence infrastructure represented a security vulnerability that demanded immediate attention. Jessica's secure communications with her operational handlers took on new urgency as the scope of the potential problem became clear. Based on cross-references in the Cedar Creek logs, we need to identify and secure at least 3 additional installations that never appeared in official inventories, she reported. The technology present here would still have intelligence value today, particularly the specialized signal interception equipment and encryption protocols. The response from headquarters was immediate. Continue documentation and prepare for extraction team arrival. Timeline accelerated to 72 hours. Maintain cover operations until handoff complete. This accelerated schedule created both operational challenges and emotional complications for Jessica. After nearly 2 years establishing herself in Cedar Creek, she had developed genuine connections with community members that went beyond her cover requirements. Eleanor Diaz had become a true friend whose stories about the region's history contained wisdom that transcended operational utility. The high school student she had mentored looked to her as a role model for sustainable ranching practices. Even Sheriff Martinez had evolved from a security concern to a respected professional colleague. The prospect of abruptly transitioning the operation to a specialized team meant abandoning these relationships without explanation or closure, a common requirement in intelligence work, but particularly difficult in a close-knit community, where her contributions had made real differences in people's lives. Jessica's training had prepared her for the operational aspects of extraction, but the human elements proved more challenging than anticipated. "Request permission for modified transition protocol," she proposed in her response to headquarters. Cover story involving family emergency would allow for potential return and continued community contact following site securization. Local relationships have intelligence value for ongoing regional operations. The measured response, transition protocol approved with limitations, family emergency cover authorized. Future contact subject to security review following site evaluation provided a framework that would allow Jessica to maintain some connections while fulfilling her primary mission requirements. With the extraction timeline established, Jessica began subtle preparations for departure while continuing normal ranch operations. She rescheduled upcoming deliveries, explained to neighboring ranchers that she might need to travel soon to help an ailing relative, and organized her documentation to facilitate efficient handoff to the incoming specialized team. As these preparations proceeded, Jessica maintained her daily routines to avoid triggering community concern. She attended the monthly town council meeting where water conservation measures were being discussed, contributing practical suggestions based on her ranch's reduced consumption patterns. She delivered promised hay bales to Eleanor Diaz's property, helping the elderly woman prepare her small herd for upcoming seasonal changes. She conducted scheduled tours of her irrigation system for county agricultural officials, who were evaluating drought mitigation strategies. These activities weren't just maintaining cover, they represented genuine contributions to a community that had accepted Jessica and validated her work. The innovations she had implemented on the Walker Ranch were making real differences in how Cedar Creek approached its environmental challenges, providing hope in a region that had been steadily losing population and economic vitality to the relentless drought. The impact of Jessica's work became unexpectedly clear during her final visit to Watson's General Store. Ed Watson, who had initially greeted her arrival with skepticism, now treated her with the respect reserved for valued community members. "Got those specialized filters you ordered," he mentioned while gathering her supplies. "Had 3 other ranchers ask about them after they saw how your system was performing. Might be the start of something important for folks around here." The observation captured what Jessica had accomplished beyond her classified mission. She had demonstrated sustainable approaches that others could adopt, potentially changing the trajectory of a community that had been sliding toward obsolescence. The water management system she had developed as cover for accessing the underground facility had evolved into a model that might help preserve ranching operations throughout the drought-stricken region. This realization brought both professional satisfaction and personal conflict. Jessica's training emphasized mission focus above all else. Securing the classified facility and its contents was her primary responsibility, with community relationships viewed as operational assets rather than meaningful connections. Yet the tangible positive impact of her cover work raised questions about value, hierarchies, and legacy that weren't addressed in operational protocols. These reflections were interrupted by an unexpected discovery during her final documentation of the underground facility. While photographing a storage area that contained what appeared to be standard maintenance equipment, Jessica noticed inconsistencies in the wall measurements that suggested a concealed space beyond. Careful examination revealed a hidden access panel, secured with a locking mechanism more sophisticated than others in the facility. Using specialized tools from her equipment cache, Jessica bypassed the security system and opened the panel to reveal a chamber that hadn't appeared on any blueprint or inventory. A room approximately 12 feet square, containing a single filing cabinet and what appeared to be a prototype communications device, unlike anything else in the installation. The filing cabinet was secured with combination locks that required several hours to defeat, even with Jessica's specialized training and equipment. When she finally opened the drawers, she found documentation classified at levels above the rest of the facility's contents, material labeled with code words that weren't in her security briefings and access limitations that exceeded her authorization. Level. Protocol required immediate reporting of such discoveries without examining the contents, but Jessica's initial inventory revealed information too significant to ignore. The documents described a program called Operation Starlight that appeared to involve technologies with capabilities far beyond what was publicly known to exist during the 1970s, references to non-conventional power sources and alternative physics applications, suggested classified research directions that had never been acknowledged in declassified histories. Most concerning were references to testing activities conducted from the Cedar Creek facility that involved field deployment in surrounding areas, including locations that now contain civilian populations. Without examining the complete files, Jessica couldn't determine whether these activities had safety implications that might affect current residents, but the possibility created immediate operational and ethical questions. Her secure communication to headquarters was carefully worded. Discovery of sealed compartment containing Starlight documentation. Initial assessment indicates potential environmental concerns requiring specialized evaluation. Request immediate dispatch of appropriately cleared personnel with scientific expertise. The response came within minutes. Maintain isolation of discovered materials. Specialized team diverted to your location. Estimated arrival 0600 tomorrow. Secure facility. And maintain position until handoff complete. This development shifted Jessica's extraction timeline and added complexity to her cover maintenance. The potential public health implications of Operation Starlight created urgency that had to be balanced against the need for operational security. If testing conducted from the Cedar Creek facility had left environmental contamination or other hazards, the specialized team would need to implement monitoring and potentially remediation measures without alerting local residents to the classified origins of the problem. Jessica used her remaining hours at the Walker Ranch to finalize documentation while preparing for both operational handoff and potential community questions. She organized the facility's contents according to security classification and historical significance, ensuring the specialized team could quickly identify priority materials. She prepared a detailed briefing on her water management system that could be shared with agricultural authorities if her cover story required extended absence. She drafted letters to key community members explaining that a family emergency required her to leave temporarily, but that she hoped to return once the situation stabilized. As dawn approached on what might be her final day in Cedar Creek, Jessica took a moment to walk the perimeter of the ranch house, watching the sun rise over red rock formations that had witnessed countless human dramas across centuries. The land itself had drawn her here because of what lay beneath it, but she had developed genuine appreciation for its harsh beauty and the resilience it demanded from those who chose to make their lives upon it. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted her reflection, not the expected extraction team, but Sheriff Martinez's patrol SUV followed by Eleanor Diaz's ancient pickup truck. This unscheduled visit created immediate security concerns, particularly with the specialized team scheduled to arrive within hours. Jessica quickly evaluated potential scenarios as she walked to meet the unexpected visitors, maintaining her cover persona while assessing possible complications. "Morning, Jessica," Sheriff Martinez called as he exited his vehicle. "Sorry to drop by so early, but Eleanor here had something she thought you needed to hear right away, and I figured I should be present given what she's found." Eleanor Diaz emerged from her truck holding what appeared to be an aged leather portfolio. "I was going through James Walker's old papers," she explained, "looking for those rainfall records we talked about. Found this hidden in a false bottom of his desk drawer. Think you'll want to see what's inside." The portfolio contained survey maps of the Walker Ranch dating from 1968, with detailed notations about underground features and construction specifications. Most significantly, it included a letter on Department of Defense letterhead instructing James Walker about security protocols related to the subsurface installation and his responsibilities as the property's civilian custodian. James was more than just a rancher, Eleanor explained quietly. During the war, he worked for Army intelligence because of his language skills. He grew up speaking Spanish and German from his mother's side. After he came back to the ranch, they recruited him again for something he never talked about. All these years, I thought the stories about something special under his land were just old rumors." Sheriff Martinez's expression revealed his professional concern. "When Eleanor showed me these papers, I recognized government, classified markings from my time in the Army. Figured we should bring them directly to you instead of calling it in through official channels. Way Eleanor tells it, you might already know what these are about." The situation represented both security crisis and operational opportunity. Jessica's cover was compromised, but the unexpected development provided potential legitimization for the activities that would soon be visible on the property as the specialized team arrived. With careful management, this revelation could be incorporated into a modified cover story that would protect the most sensitive aspects of the operation while acknowledging enough truth to satisfy local authorities. "You're right to bring these to me," Jessica acknowledged, making a split-second decision to pivot rather than deny. "I should have been more forthcoming with both of you. The water reclamation project is genuine, but it's part of a larger assessment of this property's historical significance. The government believes several sites like Walker Ranch were used during the Cold War for monitoring purposes, and I've been cataloging what remains before historical preservation specialists arrive." This partial truth, acknowledging the historical assessment while concealing current security implications, offered a framework that could accommodate the visible activity of the incoming team while maintaining essential operational security. It also provided Jessica with a modified cover that might allow future connection with the community following the immediate extraction phase. Sheriff Martinez studied her with professional assessment, but not hostility, military or intelligence. He asked directly. "Historical Preservation Division within Defense," Jessica replied, offering a plausible assignment that acknowledged government connection without revealing her actual role. "The project involves identifying Cold War sites that were removed from official records during decommissioning. Most are historically significant, but occasionally we find environmental concerns that need addressing." Eleanor Diaz nodded slowly, pieces falling into place in her understanding of the ranch's history. "James used to say he was protecting something important, but none of us knew what he meant. Thought it was just an old man's pride in his land. All these years, it was something more." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles, the specialized team arriving precisely on schedule. Jessica made another rapid operational decision, recognizing that Sheriff Martinez's presence created both challenge and opportunity for the transition. "Those would be the historical preservation specialists I mentioned," she explained. "Their arrival is fortuitous. They can answer your questions with proper authorization, which frankly exceeds my own. Would you be willing to stay and speak with the team leader? Your local knowledge would be valuable to their assessment." This approach accomplished multiple objectives. It acknowledged the sheriff's authority while incorporating him into the operation's modified cover story. It provided Eleanor with official validation of her late friend's role in government service, and it created a transitional framework that might allow Jessica to maintain community connections following the immediate extraction phase. As the convoy of unmarked government vehicles approached the ranch house, Jessica reflected on how thoroughly her mission had evolved from its original parameters. She had been sent to locate and document an abandoned Cold War facility operating undercover as a struggling rancher trying to reclaim drought-stricken land. She had accomplished that primary objective while simultaneously developing water management innovations that offered real hope to a dying community and uncovering historical secrets that might have ongoing security implications. The contents of that hidden filing cabinet would reveal that Jessica Blackwood wasn't just a dedicated rancher who had discovered a forgotten piece of Cold War history. She was Captain Jessica Blackwood, intelligence specialist assigned to Project Legacy, a classified initiative to locate and secure undocumented government facilities that might contain technologies or records with continuing national security implications. Her discovery beneath the Walker Ranch would eventually be recognized as one of the most significant recoveries in the project's history, revealing not just forgotten Cold War infrastructure, but evidence of classified research programs that had never been acknowledged in public records. As the team leader approached, a distinguished woman whose bearing suggested both military background and scientific expertise, Jessica prepared for operational handoff with the confidence of someone who had exceeded mission parameters while maintaining essential security. The modified cover story would protect the most sensitive aspects of the discovery while providing a framework for potential future operations in the region. Captain Blackwood, the team leader, greeted her quietly. Impressive work under challenging conditions. Your preliminary reports have already generated significant interest at the highest levels. Thank you, ma'am, Jessica responded formally before gesturing towards Sheriff Martinez and Eleanor Diaz. I'd like to introduce local resources who have provided valuable historical context. Their cooperation will be essential for the transition phase. As Jessica made introductions, she maintained the professional demeanor expected of an intelligence operative, while acknowledging the human connections that had become unexpectedly meaningful during her time in Cedar Creek. The mission would continue under new management, but the relationship she had built and the innovation she had developed would remain as legacy contributions to a community that had accepted her without knowing her true purpose. The underground facility's contents would eventually reveal technological approaches and intelligence operations that would require historical reassessment of Cold War capabilities and activities. The water management system Jessica had developed as cover would be implemented on other struggling ranches throughout the region, helping preserve agricultural communities that had been facing extinction from prolonged drought. And the connections she had formed with Cedar Creek residents would evolve from operational assets to genuine relationships, maintained within appropriate security parameters. The Red Rocks of Arizona had kept their secrets for decades, hiding Cold War infrastructure beneath their sun-baked surface while ranchers struggled to coax life from the unforgiving land above. Jessica Blackwood had uncovered those secrets while demonstrating that even the harshest environments could yield both hidden treasures and sustainable futures when approached with determination, innovation, and respect for the resilience of both the land and the people who called it home. The revelation of what truly lay beneath the Walker Ranch transformed Cedar Creek from a forgotten drought-stricken town into the center of an operation that combined historical preservation, national security concerns, and scientific discovery. The specialized team that arrived on that crisp morning in May 2022 brought expertise that spanned multiple disciplines: military historians who could evaluate the facility's place in Cold War infrastructure, environmental scientists equipped to assess potential contamination from past testing activities, and intelligence specialists who understood the significance of the classified documents Jessica had discovered. Dr. Samantha Wells, the distinguished woman who led the team, had spent 20 years tracking the scattered remains of classified Cold War programs. Her background combined military intelligence experience with advanced degrees in history and environmental science, exactly the expertise needed to evaluate the complex discovery beneath the Walker Ranch. After a brief private briefing from Jessica, Dr. Wells immediately recognized the significance of what had been found. This installation represents the intersection of multiple black programs that were supposedly discontinued in the mid-1970s. She explained to Jessica while they conducted an initial assessment of the hidden chamber. Operation Starlight was officially terminated in 1974 following congressional budget reviews, but these records suggest activities continued at select sites including Cedar Creek. The implications are significant both historically and for current security protocols. The transition of operational authority proceeded with the efficiency expected of professional intelligence personnel, but with unexpected adaptations to accommodate the local relationships Jessica had established. Rather than implementing a standard extraction that would have removed Jessica from the community without explanation, Dr. Wells authorized a modified approach that incorporated Sheriff Martinez and Eleanor Diaz into a carefully constructed partial disclosure. The Walker Ranch facility appears to be the most intact Cold War monitoring station we've discovered, Dr. Wells explained to Sheriff Martinez during a briefing in Jessica's kitchen. These installations were removed from official inventories during the 1970s as part of security protocols that, in retrospect, created more problems than they solved. Captain Blackwood's discovery provides an unprecedented opportunity to properly document this history while ensuring any environmental concerns are addressed. This approach, acknowledging the historical significance while emphasizing preservation and safety, provided a framework that satisfied the sheriff's professional responsibilities without revealing the more sensitive aspects of the operation. Martinez, whose military background gave him appreciation for classified operations, recognized that he was receiving a sanitized briefing, but accepted the limitations as necessary for national security. "My primary concern is ensuring nothing on that property poses a risk to local residents," he stated clearly. "Beyond that, I understand some aspects of this operation will remain classified. As long as appropriate environmental assessments are conducted and my jurisdiction is respected, you'll have my cooperation." Eleanor Diaz received a different kind of acknowledgement, official recognition of her friend James Walker's service to national security. Dr. Wells presented her with a letter on Department of Defense letterhead that formally acknowledged Walker's role as a property custodian for a classified facility and expressed gratitude for his decades of discretion. This simple document transformed family stories that had been dismissed as an old man's fantasies into validated history, providing Eleanor with both personal closure and enhanced status within the community. James always said he was doing important work, even after he came back to just being a rancher, Eleanor recalled, holding the acknowledgement letter carefully. People thought he was just talking big, trying to make ordinary life seem more important. All these years later, turns out, he was telling the truth in his own way. For Jessica, the operational transition created both professional opportunities and personal challenges. Dr. Wells had requested that she remain attached to the Cedar Creek project during the initial assessment phase, recognizing that her knowledge of both the underground facility and the local community represented valuable operational assets. This assignment allowed Jessica to maintain her connection to the work she had started, while requiring her to adapt to a new role within a larger team structure. "Your cover as a water management specialist remains valid and useful," Dr. Wells noted during their private briefing. "The ranch operations you've established provide perfect operational cover for our assessment activities." And your relationships with local residents will help manage community concerns that might arise during our work. This continued connection to Cedar Creek proved more meaningful than Jessica had anticipated. The professional relationship she had developed with community members had evolved beyond operational assets to become genuine connections that she valued personally as well as professionally. Eleanor Diaz had become a true friend whose wisdom and resilience represented the best qualities of Western ranch communities. The high school students she had mentored looked to her as a model for combining innovation with respect for traditional knowledge. Even Sheriff Martinez had become a respected colleague whose professional integrity matched her own commitment to duty. As the specialized team began their systematic assessment of the underground facility, Jessica maintained her visible role as the Walker Ranch's operator while serving as liaison between the government personnel and local community. This dual function allowed her to continue the water management work that had genuine value for the drought-affected region while facilitating the classified operations happening beneath the surface. The team's findings exceeded even the significant expectations generated by Jessica's initial discovery. The Cedar Creek installation wasn't just a listening post. It was a command center for regional operations that included multiple satellite facilities throughout the Southwest. Technical documentation revealed surveillance capabilities that hadn't been acknowledged in any declassified history, including systems for monitoring communications that were supposedly secure during that era. Most significantly, the operation Starlight files contained evidence of testing activities that combined conventional communications technology with approaches drawn from theoretical physics, research that remained classified even decades later. These tests, conducted between 1971 and 1973, had explored the potential for what the documents described as enhanced signal propagation using localized field effects, language that suggested capabilities beyond what was publicly known to exist. The environmental assessment team's findings were simultaneously reassuring and concerning. No immediate health hazards were detected in soil or water samples from the ranch property or surrounding areas, suggesting that whatever testing had occurred hadn't left conventional contamination. However, unusual electromagnetic readings at specific locations corresponded with the testing sites mentioned in the Starlight documentation, indicating that some aspect of those experiments had created persistent effects that required further investigation. Dr. Malcolm Chen, the environmental science lead on the assessment team, struggled to categorize these anomalies within standard scientific frameworks. "We're detecting energy patterns that don't align with known environmental phenomena," he explained during a secure briefing. "They're stable, localized, and appear to be self-sustaining, characteristics that suggest intentional design rather than natural occurrence or conventional technological residue." These discoveries elevated the Cedar Creek operation from historical documentation to active scientific investigation. Additional specialists were brought in to evaluate the anomalies, working undercover as environmental consultants conducting drought studies. Their equipment and activities were incorporated into the water management narrative that Jessica had established, maintaining operational security while expanding the scope of the investigation. Throughout this intensifying activity, Jessica continued her role as the public face of the Walker Ranch operations. She conducted tours of her water reclamation system for agricultural officials, participated in community meetings about regional drought responses, and maintained the ranch's small cattle operation as visible cover for the classified work. These activities weren't just operational necessity, they represented meaningful contributions to a community that was fighting for survival against environmental and economic challenges. Ed Watson captured this impact during the conversation at the General Store 6 weeks into the expanded operation. "Don't know what you and your research friends are doing out there exactly," he commented while filling Jessica's supply order, "but it's bringing hope to folks who were about ready to give up." 3 families who were planning to sell out have decided to stay and try your water management approach. First time in years we've had people choosing to stay rather than leave. This tangible positive influence created both satisfaction and tension for Jessica. Her military training emphasized mission focus above all else, securing the classified facility and managing potential security concerns were her primary responsibilities. Yet the visible benefits of her cover work had real significance for SOAR. People whose lives and livelihoods depended on sustainable approaches to the changing climate. This dual impact raised questions about value hierarchies that weren't addressed in operational protocols but resonated in her personal assessment of meaningful service. The specialized team's work reached a critical juncture in August 2022, approximately 3 months after their arrival. The full inventory of the underground facility had been completed, with materials categorized according to historical significance, current security implications, and scientific value. The environmental assessment had mapped the anomalous energy patterns and established monitoring systems that could detect any changes or expansions. The operational history had been reconstructed from recovered documentation, creating a comprehensive understanding of the facility's function within larger classified programs. Dr. Wells convened a secure briefing to address the operation's next phase. "We've reached the point where strategic decisions are required," she explained to the assembled team leaders. Standard protocol would dictate removal of all sensitive materials to secure government facilities, decommissioning of the underground, installation and restoration of the property to civilian use with appropriate monitoring systems in place. The recommendation aligned with established procedures for handling recovered classified sites, but Dr. Wells continued with an unexpected assessment. However, the unique characteristics of this discovery suggest alternative approaches that merit consideration. The integration of the historical facility with Captain Blackwood's innovative water management system creates opportunities for simultaneous advancement of multiple national priorities, preserving critical historical information, maintaining security of classified materials, and developing sustainable approaches to drought mitigation that could benefit communities throughout the Southwest. This perspective recognized what Jessica had already intuited, that the most valuable aspects of the Walker Ranch operation weren't limited to what lay beneath the surface. The visible agricultural innovations she had developed as cover had evolved into models with regional significance for communities facing existential environmental challenges. The combination of these elements created potential for impact that transcended standard operational parameters. The briefing concluded with an unprecedented recommendation. "I am proposing establishment of a permanent research facility at the Walker Ranch location, operating under classified status but maintaining agricultural operations as both cover and legitimate contribution to regional sustainability." This approach would secure the underground installation while creating infrastructure for continued scientific investigation of both the starlight anomalies and advanced water management techniques. The proposal represented significant deviation from standard procedures, requiring approval from multiple government agencies and specialized funding allocations. While these administrative processes advanced through secure channels, the team continued their work at Cedar Creek, maintaining the careful balance between classified operations and visible agricultural activities. For Jessica, this transitional period provided opportunities to deepen both aspects of the operation. She expanded the water management system to incorporate additional drought-resistant techniques, creating demonstration areas that could be shared with regional ranchers without compromising security. She worked with the scientific team to establish monitoring protocols for the energy anomalies that would function within the operational parameters of a working ranch. She strengthened community relationships that would support long-term presence in the region while maintaining appropriate operational security. The proposed permanent facility received final approval in October 2022, with implementation scheduled to begin immediately. The operational structure would combine military, scientific, and agricultural components under unified management, with personnel selected for expertise across multiple disciplines. Dr. Wells would serve as facility director, overseeing the classified aspects of the operation, while Jessica was offered a position as agricultural operations lead, a role that would maintain her cover identity while acknowledging her expertise in water management innovation. The transition to permanent status required physical modifications to the property that would balance security requirements with agricultural functionality. The underground facility needed upgraded access systems, modern environmental controls, and enhanced communication capabilities. The ranch infrastructure required expansion to accommodate additional personnel while maintaining the appearance of a modestly successful agricultural operation. These changes needed to be implemented without triggering community speculation or compromising the carefully established cover narrative. Jessica developed a phased approach that addressed these challenges while creating opportunities for positive community engagement. The first stage involved establishing a formal agricultural research partnership with Arizona State University that provided legitimate cover for facility expansion. Dr. Alana Ramirez, the hydrologist who had previously visited the ranch, became an unwitting ally in this effort, enthusiastically supporting establishment of a drought resilience research station that would document and refine the water management approaches Jessica had pioneered. This academic partnership created plausible explanation for increased personnel, new construction, and specialized equipment arriving at the property. Local residents welcomed the development as evidence of investment in their community's future, interpreting the activity as validation of approaches that might help preserve their way of life. The university connection also provided opportunities to incorporate local knowledge into the research program, acknowledging the generations of experience that ranch families brought to water management challenges. Sheriff Martinez remained a key figure in maintaining community support while ensuring appropriate security. His professional background gave him understanding of classified operations that allowed him to serve as an informal liaison between the government team and local authorities. "I don't need to know everything that's happening out there," he explained during a private conversation with Jessica and Dr. Wells, "but I do need to know enough to protect both your operation and my community. As long as those needs stay aligned, you'll have my cooperation." This pragmatic approach, acknowledging classification requirements while emphasizing shared interests in community welfare, established a foundation for sustainable coexistence between the classified facility and the ranching community. Rather than operating in isolation or opposition, the Walker Ranch operation became integrated into Cedar Creek's social fabric in ways that provided mutual benefits while maintaining necessary security boundaries. Eleanor Diaz emerged as another crucial connector between the classified operation and local community. Her friendship with James Walker gave her unique historical perspective on the property's dual functions, while her standing as a respected elder provided influence within community networks. The official acknowledgement of Walker's service had enhanced her status further, allowing her to subtly shape local narratives about the ranch's new role in ways that supported operational security. James would be proud to see his place serving important purposes again, Eleanor commented during a community dinner celebrating the new research partnership. "He always said that land was special, had a purpose beyond just raising cattle. Turns out he knew things the rest of us are just starting to understand." This blending of classified truth and public narrative represented the operation's most sophisticated achievement, creating a sustainable presence that served multiple national interests while providing genuine benefits to the surrounding community. The underground facility remained secure, with its historical contents preserved and its anomalies studied under controlled conditions. The agricultural operation continued to develop drought-resistant approaches that could be implemented throughout the region. The community gained economic stability through jobs, research investment, and sustainable water management techniques that might ensure their survival despite changing climate conditions. For Jessica, the transition to permanent operations created both professional recognition and personal satisfaction. Her role as agricultural operations lead acknowledged the expertise she had developed in water management while maintaining her cover identity. Her continuing presence in Cedar Creek allowed her to strengthen community connections that had become personally meaningful beyond their operational value. Her contribution to national security extended beyond the classified facility to include sustainable approaches that addressed environmental challenges with strategic implications for regional stability. The most powerful validation came unexpectedly during a visit from General Robert Harrison, the senior military officer overseeing the classified aspects of the operation. After touring both the underground facility and the agricultural systems, he offered an assessment that captured the operation's unique significance. Most classified operations succeed or fail based on how effectively they remain separate from civilian communities, he observed. What you've accomplished here represents something different, integration that serves both security and societal interests. The technical discoveries beneath this ranch may eventually be recognized as historically significant, but the model you've developed for combining classified operations with community benefits may be equally important for our future approach to national security. This perspective reflected emerging recognition within military and intelligence communities that traditional operational isolation created vulnerabilities as well as protections. By developing approaches that provided genuine community benefits while maintaining appropriate security boundaries, the Walker Ranch operation demonstrated possibilities for sustainable presence that enhanced rather than undermined long-term mission effectiveness. As permanent operations were established through the winter of 2022 to 2023, Jessica maintained her dual focus on classified work and community engagement. She continued refining water management systems that balanced operational security with agricultural productivity. She worked with local schools to develop educational programs that would prepare students for potential employment in sustainable agriculture. She participated in regional planning discussions about drought response strategies that might preserve rural communities throughout the Southwest. The underground facility revealed new historical and scientific insights as specialized teams continued their assessment of recovered materials. Technical documentation provided unprecedented information about surveillance capabilities that had remained classified for decades, requiring reassessment of historical narratives about Cold War intelligence operations. The energy anomalies associated with Operation Starlight demonstrated properties that challenged conventional scientific frameworks, suggesting research directions that might eventually have applications in renewable energy and communication technology. Most significantly, the integration of these classified activities with visible agricultural innovation created a model that served multiple national priorities, simultaneously preserving historical knowledge, maintaining security of sensitive materials, developing sustainable approaches to environmental challenges, and supporting communities affected by changing climate conditions. This comprehensive approach represented evolution beyond traditional operational parameters to address interconnected challenges facing both intelligence operations and civilian communities. The contents of that hidden filing cabinet had revealed that Jessica Blackwood wasn't just a dedicated rancher who had discovered a forgotten piece of Cold War history. She was Captain Jessica Blackwood, intelligence specialist whose expertise in water management had transformed a standard recovery operation into an innovative model for sustainable classified facilities. Her discovery beneath the Walker Ranch would eventually be recognized as the foundation for a new approach to intelligence infrastructure, one that created mutual benefits for national security and civilian communities rather than requiring separation. between classified operations and public welfare. As spring brought new growth to the Walker Ranch in 2023, Jessica reflected on the journey that had brought her to this unexpected integration of professional mission and personal purpose. She had arrived in Cedar Creek with focused operational objectives: locate and assess an abandoned Cold War facility that might contain historically significant materials. She had discovered not only a classified installation with extraordinary historical and scientific value, but also a community whose resilience in the face of environmental challenges mirrored the determination she brought to her military service. The synthesis of these elements had created something more meaningful than either component alone could have achieved: a sustainable operation that preserved national security assets while developing approaches to environmental challenges that threatened regional stability. This integration represented not just successful mission completion, but evolution in how classified operations could function within civilian contexts, creating mutual benefits that enhanced both security and community welfare. Standing on a ridge overlooking the ranch as evening approached, Jessica watched researchers moving between buildings that housed both classified operations and legitimate agricultural innovation. Local ranchers gathered near the demonstration fields, where drought-resistant techniques were being refined for regional implementation. The underground facility beneath her feet contained historical treasures that would eventually transform understanding of Cold War operations, while the visible ranch operations developed approaches that might ensure survival of communities throughout the drought-affected Southwest. The red rocks of Arizona had kept their secrets for decades, concealing classified infrastructure, while the harsh landscape above challenged those who sought to build lives upon it. Jessica Blackwood had uncovered those secrets while demonstrating that even the most unforgiving environments could yield both hidden treasures and sustainable futures when approached with determination, innovation, and respect for the resilience of both the land and the people who called it home. What had begun as a simple well repair had revealed multi-layered truths about America's past and potential futures, historical operations that had never been acknowledged, technological approaches that challenged scientific understanding, and sustainable methods that might preserve communities facing environmental transformation. The Walker Ranch had become a place where classified history and future innovation converged, creating possibilities that neither could have achieved in isolation. As twilight deepened over Cedar Creek, Jessica recognized that the most valuable discovery hadn't been the underground facility with its historical significance and technological mysteries. It had been the demonstration that national security and community welfare could advance together rather than in opposition, that the same determination and culture innovation that had produced classified Cold War infrastructure could now be applied to challenges that threaten both military operations and civilian communities across the changing American landscape. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.